working my way through it, and
Oh, no, we're just going
Old
up.
drink thing.
No, Nancy's.
the entry boarding says have one, no, have two. Order two, and I was just like, okay, I'll order one.
We'll see if we can get it.
And the first drink,
Sometime you got
the
to.
first
One of the
drink,
best memories I ever had.
delicious. The second you press your tongue to the roof of your mouth to like actually swallow, I was like,
Mike would always send my calls, would always send her.
that's not good.
And we went and toured the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to get this gift, I've got to get started.
Yeah, get him for the camera.
I've been over there.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of training.
I promised both the boys, that's why am I not allowed to say that?
If you behave, she goes steps in
I'll sit wherever I need. Elbow me if I
Big crowd tonight.
Yeah.
Hi, guys.
Been here with family.
Oh, good, how are you?
How did it go?
Everybody put that temporary crate, let me slide there.
I'll be happy to answer part of that. Because I thank God I did not get sick because I was vaccinated. I didn't get coronation. So I could go So Seth got really sick. And when I came here last time, I told you guys he had approved me, and I had asked them to get the test before. We've just been trying to do that anytime because I've got some face pretty vulnerable. And I thought it was COVID there. And they told us they were like, who's going around? Like, who's got a lot of people.
RSV, yeah, they're all,
It was
yeah.
COVID. So he was out for a while.
Did he take care of laser pen?
Is it working? Yeah, and then Eric got a mild fever infection, but
Well,
it
I
was
might
okay.
have to guess it's
Yeah. I would love you to check.
Yeah, we, I did accordingly to your pictures because Eric had to rapid test every 2 days when Seth was sick. And then once he tested positive, I took him to get this one.
Over down at the garage.
You're ready to rock and roll there. Attention, please.
I'd like to call the December 2nd regular Wilmington City Council meeting to order. May we have roll call, please?
Jay McKay. Snar.
Here.
Pickard.
Here.
Perky.
Here.
Evelyn.
Here.
Learman.
Here, go Falcons.
Swindler.
Somebody had to do it.
Here.
McKay.
C, oh, you don't have to. C, one absent member, what is your pleasure?
Move to be excused.
Second.
Motion second to excuse the absent member. Would you stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance?
No, I appreciate the explanations.
Always happy to try to help. And then, you know, I'm gonna follow right on. Christy and I are Massey alumni.
That's right.
So we definitely
Go
say
Falcons.
go Falcons. And I have a grandson right on the front line. He's an offensive line tackle.
What's on the back of the shirt?
Alumni.
Falcon.
The Falcons. So we, you know, you're advanced. Let's go.
And again tomorrow.
And tomorrow. Yep. Thank you. That's all, Mr. President.
Thank you, Alderman Pickett. Safety Service Director, Mr. Shiger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have 3 items this evening. Before I begin, the mayor brought up birthdays. I just want to mention the city administrator had a birthday on Friday. So
Thanks.
he did not mention that. And Bill, you have a son that's getting ready to have a birthday on Monday.
6 hours difference.
Yep. And my mom and Bill's wife were in labor together, and I won. I came out first. 6 hours ahead. So Steve and I have birthdays coming up this weekend that are, it's a big birthday. It's the 40th. So
Yeah, it's true.
I didn't say that part.
28
Ish.
ish. Okay, yeah. All right. So back to business. The first item is the second and third reading on the surplus property. We already had first reading on this. Does anyone have any questions before we move forward? Okay, so the first reading is the first one's the second and third reading on resolution 2143.
I move to suspend the rules and regulations, give resolution 2143 a second, third read by title only.
Second.
Have a motion and second for suspension of rules on resolution 2143. Roll call, please.
Perky,
Yes.
Evelyn,
Yes?
Bierman,
Yes.
Swindler,
Yes.
Snar,
Yes.
Bicker.
Yes.
Motion passes. May we have second, third reading, please?
Declaring surplus property to wit, water, sanitation, and transit department vehicles and Sugar Grove Cemetery equipment valued at more than $1,000 and authorizing the sale of said property.
Move to pass resolution 2143 as read.
Second.
Motion for passage, resolution 2143. May we have roll call, please?
Evelyn,
Yes.
Bierman,
Yes.
Swindler,
Yes.
Snar,
Yes.
Bicker.
Yes.
Perky.
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 2143 passes.
Okay, the second item, 3 readings on resolution 2145, authorizing myself to enter into contract with the lowest and best bidder for Mulberry Street Improvement Project. We've discussed this multiple times in the past, but I don't think we've ever done a formal presentation on the Mulberry Street project. So I have a quick PowerPoint that I would like to show you guys tonight. The North Mulberry Street project is going to be from New York Avenue. And it's bounded by the intersections of West Locust and A Street. We're expecting construction to begin in 2022 spring and complete by the end of the year next year. Here's a map depicting that. We're milling and doing an overlay, which is new asphalt, approximately 3,300 linear feet of road. We're going to repair the damaged sidewalk so that we have continuous pedestrian access all the way along North Mulberry. And this was the main reason why we did this. And if Rick wants to chime in, please do. There was an old 4-inch water main under North Mulberry, and we're going to replace it with a new 6-inch main. Did you want to speak to that, Rick?
I mean, how this all started is we had a break down by the creek here, and when they fixed it, the actual space where water could fit was less than an inch of water, instead of even 4 inches, or even 4 inches enough, so a quarter of that is a real problem. So that's how this all got started. And that line is a good 100 years old, our original line to the system. So it's, those customers have no idea how much better water they're going to get when this is over. So.
And obviously our main line's not lead, but there are some lead service lines. So we're going to replace all of those along the way. We're going to install ADA compliant ramps at all the intersection, add curb bump outs at Mulberry Street, at Birdsall and Fulton. As far as the funding is concerned, we've talked about this before as well. We've been very successful in getting grants on this project. Rick really spearheaded the EPA lead line grant, which is $80,000. Together we worked and got the OPWC grant, which was $650,000, as well as this 0% loan, $234,000. And then the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, is going to pick up the rest. So we're looking at approximately $1.695 in grants and a 0% loan. When we put this project out to bid, our engineer's estimate was 1.9, and we opened bids, I think it was about a week and a half ago. And we thought, 1.9 estimate, we were worried. We thought, over $2 million with the way things are going right now. I think we're very fortunate. It appears that our lowest and best bid will be Fillmore Construction, who we've worked with multiple times in the past, came in at 1.54. So very excited about that. And as you can see, we had several competitive bids, but the lowest bid, and what appears to be the best bid, is very promising. Again, if you want to stay informed, I always put this up almost every time we meet. You go to our projects page, there's the address. You can subscribe to us, or you can just contact us. I say this all the time. We're not on Facebook, we're not on Snapchat, we're not on Twitter, we're not on those places. If you want to have accurate information, don't go to Facebook. Go to these 3 resources right here, and you'll get accurate information. Any questions on that? It's
Did that
exciting.
stroke of luck on getting a bid back that was actually lower than projected?
It's always that is so nerve wracking when you look at that. I mean, this person, like, the second lowest bid was 1.9, so we got, that's 400,000 right there. Yeah, we got.
Not yet.
How high the bids have been the last year.
So we were very excited when we opened those bids. I was too. So very exciting. So with that said, I would ask for 3 readings authorizing me to enter into a contract for the lowest and best bid for the Mulberry Street project.
Brian, just one question.
Yeah.
Comment, I guess. That's a hell of a bid spread.
It is.
50%? And the high bidder is the contractor that's doing our Rollback Avenue project?
Correct. So this person did the Grant Street project. Was it this year or last year?
Well, a year ago right now.
Yep. This is Romback, and then this is the contractor that's been doing our paving project for the
Didn't
past.
Stoffer or
2
somebody
years?
do the Grant Street?
Yeah, he did. That's why I just said, yeah, the Grant Street. So it was, yeah. It kind of goes to show the market right now. You don't really know. But we've worked with Fillmore, and we're pleased with that bid.
They're good people.
Yep. Any other questions?
Ask for a motion.
I would move for the first reading by title only.
Second.
Motion by Smothers, second by Lehrman, resolution 2145, first reading. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Any opposed? First reading, please.
Authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into contract with the lowest and best bidder for the Mulberry Street Improvements Project, and authorizing expenditure of funds for same, and declaring an emergency.
Move for the suspension of rules and regulations to give the second and third reading by title only.
Second.
Motion and second for suspension of rules. Do we have roll call, please?
Snar?
Yes.
Nope. Wrong one. And I start over.
Guys, she's new, be nice.
Yeah. Learman,
Yes.
Swindler,
Yes.
Snar,
Yes.
Bicker,
Yes.
Perky,
Yes.
Evelyn.
Yes.
Motion passes. May we have second and third reading, please?
Authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into contract with the lowest and best bidder for the Mulberry Street Improvements Project, and authorizing expenditure of funds for same, and declaring an emergency.
Move for passage.
Second.
Motion and second for passage. Roll call, please.
Swindler,
Yes.
Snar,
Yes.
Bicker,
Yes.
Perky,
Yes.
Evelyn,
Yes.
Learman.
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 2145 passes.
So we're in contract negotiations with both the dispatch and the firefighters. And a few weeks ago, if you recall, I came to you and asked for what's called a G11 waiver. We've been through this before. This basically allows us to continue to negotiate in good faith through the contracts expire at the end of the year. But it allows us the ability to negotiate through next year, and if we need to make it retroactive. If you don't do a G11 waiver, then an arbitrator is forced to do wage adjustments for 2023, and a lot of times they will punish cities for not acting in good faith and entering into a G11 waiver. So this is something our labor attorney has asked us to enter into, and I've presented to the council before and asked that you allow us and authorize us to enter into what's called a G11 waiver with the firefighters, so that we can negotiate in good faith if this does go beyond December 31st. Any questions about that?
Have a motion, please. Oh, is this a reading?
Just a motion pass, yeah,
Just a simple motion?
yes, please.
Motion, please, to pass this.
Sure. I'll move to support the collective bargaining agreement between the city of Wilmington and the Wilmington Professional Firefighters, G11 waiver.
Second.
Have a motion, second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, unless you have any questions, that's all I have tonight.
Clarification.
Yes.
Just a second.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Reports and action, City Revitalization Committee, Mr. Snar.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. City Services Committee, Mr. Eagle.
No report, Mr. President.
Finance Committee,
Okay, we have quite a few items this evening. Our first item is a second reading on ordinance 2157, making appropriations for current expenses for the year ending December 31st, 2022. This is our budget. Happy to entertain questions about this because I know a few members were absent in the last meeting when we did have the budget workshop. So we can walk through this, answer any questions that you may have or anything that you need clarification on. So the plan would be, we did the first reading in the last meeting, second reading this evening, and then we would ask for the third reading on the December 16th meeting. Really proud that we've been able to spread these out and not have to pass a budget with emergency measures. I feel like that's how government should work, giving us all time to review and ask questions and time for those questions to sort of bubble up in our minds. So happy to open the floor for any budget related questions.
I think one of the concepts we discussed briefly about stormwater was the idea of potentially looking at credits. And I didn't know, we hadn't moved forward with that to the best of my knowledge yet, and I didn't know if there was any intention of that, and if so, should we try to think about those for budgetary purposes?
That was something, I mean, Rick and I, we brought that up, what was that, a month ago, 2 months ago?
Yeah, it's a
something
couple
like
months
that.
ago.
And I just kind of put it in your guys' court if you want to have a committee meeting, and I think it could be something separate from the budget. I mean, if you want to explore that possibility in committee or whatever, but that was just something we brought up.
Right.
As a possible
As a
thing.
possibility,
So,
yeah.
I didn't remember us having any further discussion on it, and I didn't know if I missed it in discussion. But
No, there wasn't.
I didn't see anything in the budget for it, so I didn't, my assumption would be that we were not moving forward with anything like that at this point, but
Right.
I think it would be worth exploring.
We just need to be careful though. We need this much money. So if I'm crediting this person, I gotta charge this person more. So we want to be careful.
One of the things that I don't want to speak out of turn to it, but with the stormwater, I feel like we were really behind on implementing the program the way we have, you know, and looking at communities around us. There's some of these programs have been in place 20 years. So I'm sure you're like me, all taking plenty of phone calls and emails and questions from the community about how it works, why it's this way, and what other communities have done, why did we take so long. So, you know, I really want to explore ways to kind of help make it as fair to all users as possible. Impervious surface square footage is the default standard from what I can tell from the EPA. So I think that's the standard we're held to, but I know that I've heard some people that are frustrated and, you know, trying to get answers for it. So probably not the right time to discuss this here, but we can discuss it moving forward. But I did want to ask, as opposed to the budget, you know, while we're talking about the budget first, any consideration for any money?
I would say we could do a committee discussion on it, but I don't think that'll be in my court any longer, so recommend though that happen after the first of the year.
And you have 2 members of that committee.
Yeah, and I don't know if those have been set yet, but whoever oversees utilities should absolutely consider having that discussion. Great point. Do you mean when you say in making it more fair in the calculation of what people owe, or more accessible and understandable to people?
Both. I think that we have limited resources to get information out there to the community, and while it has, you know, the state's required us to do it for a long time, and we just finally got around to it, and it all happened at once. Most people I spoke to found out about it when they opened the bill. You know, they're like, what is this? You know, they should have read the supplemental that was in there that talked about it, the little flyer, or seen it on the website or the newspaper, but they don't. And so the reality is they see it when they're like, why is my bill so much more? And I know everybody sitting up here fields those same kind of questions about, well, let me explain how this works, and we give you some resources. But in looking around, I started looking at some other communities, and there are some that have some pretty robust and some pretty explanation pages, some different credits that are offered based on things that have real. And one I saw, I think it was Springfield, they have a really big program for, you know, rain gardens, cistern installs, things that help actually take water out of it. So they're not huge, but if you're willing to invest the time in your property to help reduce the amount of water that's going in, then it does yield a credit. So I think there's some programs we should look into, but I did want to speak to it specifically under the stormwater because it is in the utility for us. So.
And I don't know, did you end up writing a response that would help people understand the stormwater utility?
I did.
Okay. know that that's challenging. I didn't see it in the paper. I knew that that was being worked on, but I think that the communication challenge is always tough. We know that newspaper doesn't reach everybody. We try to share it in council. Yeah, so.
It's tough.
Yeah, maybe some additional, I did use the map for the first time myself when we paved our driveway and added a bunch of impervious surface. And it was actually an interesting process to go through and check the map, and obviously we'll be paying more now. But I thought it was pretty user-friendly, but I agree that we should look at ways to communicate it further so people better understand it.
And I think if there are people who are unhappy with the amount they're paying, looking at ways for them to do positive things for our stormwater utility that can offset costs are things we should look into. So again, not necessarily a discussion over here, but I appreciate the indulgence.
Well, like you just said, I think probably the biggest concern that I have in the stormwater appropriations, and that is being able to explain to the people exactly what the money's going for. And I just, before the meeting, I think I said at the last meeting, I'm gonna have some questions, and I passed them along, and I was kind of delinquent in doing that, but I gave Brian a list of the things that I see in the appropriation that are concerning, or at least questions that need to be answered before third reading, at least in my estimation. Specifically, more detail on how those individual line items were developed.
I mean, and I can go right down this list if you want, right now, whatever you want.
I don't think we want to take council's time with it tonight, but I do think we want to have a specific meeting on the things that I gave Brian.
You want a
If you have
specific
questions about the
public
budget
works
lines,
committee,
that's
or?
Yeah, well,
You wanna, I mean, we won't have, I mean, the next meeting would be our third reading, so.
Yeah, we might as well do it now. I mean, I don't mind
I'm fine
spending the
saying-
time.
I'll be glad to throw them out if you're ready.
Okay, so yes, about the stormwater engineering line, it's $100,000, where that number comes from. So, we're doing a slow study in every quadrant, or not even quadrant, it's sewer skates. But they call it kind of like a watershed, or a sewer shed, where they drains it. So they did an overall one with the master plan that told us how much trouble we were in with stormwater getting into our sanitary sewers. So and that was a general, they put flow meters on the sewers in various parts of town, especially overall numbers. And from the master plan, the airport area was the biggest contributor of stormwater into the sanitary. So right now we're wrapping up that study to really figure out what we need to do out there, what needs to be done by the airport, what needs to be done by us. Some of it will be stormwater, some of it will be sanitary, and so the next area is going to be over by the high school, north to Virginia, into the Monopoly area, part of the Monopoly area, the northern.
A.B. New York.
Oh, I see, yeah, right, so, that's just getting started. So, basically, each one of those costs about $200,000 to do the study. And so we're splitting that between sanitary, the wastewater, and the stormwater. And so, yes, the village competitively quoted, and so back when we hired Prime AE to do the, master plan, and that was before I was on wastewater. But it was the traditional, you seek out qualifications, and Prime AE got that job, and they've been doing a good job, so it only makes sense to keep using them. It's really the same project, continuing on and on. To bring a new firm up to speed for every portion would be, you end up spending half your money getting them up to speed and whatnot. So that's gonna be ongoing for 5-10 years, doing area by area.
So that $100,000 will cover all the deliverables that they have promised us.
100 on the stormwater side, 100 on the wastewater side.
Okay.
And it's partially a wastewater problem, partially a stormwater problem. Yeah, for next year, yes.
Had we not done this, this would all be thrown into the sewer fund.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. In fact, there was $200,000 last year in the sewer budget for this process.
How does this differ from the consultant service line item for $130,000?
Right, so that's Wolpert. That is the company,
Okay.
that is the company that put this all together for us. That contract was, they got nothing up front to set it up. The contract was that they get 8% of the income for, I think, it's 7 years. So instead of having to put up money up front where, you know,
The collections website interface that you use, that the citizens use, they generated and created that, and the data. They maintain the data.
and they'll update it for us. And they also provide other services related to the stormwater permit and helping us update that, and that's all part of that contract. So, it wasn't just setting up the fee, it was also supporting the whole program. So, throughout the life of the contract.
The regulatory fees, I'm still,
Oh.
I'm still not gonna have it, because it's shown twice in the
But
budget.
that's a typo.
Typo, okay.
It only needs to be that once, it's the same number, it's the same line number, somehow I got on it twice, but it's,
That's an easy fix.
yeah, right,
Stormwater system supplies at 100,000.
right.
You gotta understand, whenever I see, okay, first of all, $100,000 is $10 per person for everybody in Wilmington, okay?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, when I see a round number like that, it looks to me like somebody's throwing a dart at the dart.
Oh.
Can you explain to me, is that based
Right,
on previous?
well, basically, yeah, that is what we were, in last year's budget, you'll see a stormwater supplies line, that was $100,000, and we had spent, I think we're out of money, we had spent it all. So I made it the same, for now, but yeah, again, with this inflation stuff, I mean, you know, it's not gonna buy what it did last time, but that's where it came from, that's what we had appropriate last year, out of wastewater for stormwater supply. Those are, logic catch basins and the, forms and the concrete and some pipe, but the biggest thing, catch basins all over town are ancient, falling apart, and we're chasing them the best we can, but there's gotta be a list of 200 of them that need attention.
That would also have been in the sewer fund. And
Exactly, shouldn't, all these years, when that shouldn't come out of stormwater, it's coming out of wastewater, so.
Public outreach, 50,000.
Right.
Where'd that number come from?
So one of the things we have planned, one of the big parts of the stormwater, program is to keep pollutants out of the water. And like even household stuff like oil, you know, fuel overdue this, dumpster, you know. So we have scheduled for April a, household waste collection, that people will be able to come, we'll have a drop off at the wastewater plant, they'll be able to go right around the circle easy. And, so that's gonna be, what that will cost will depend on how much it drops off. We're just in $35,000.
We have a quote for the mobilization, and then it's a price
Right.
per how much is collected. So it's like 8,000 to show up, I think, And then they have an engineer or a lab technician, on site that tests everything to make sure it is and puts it in the receipt. And then based on how much we have to recycle, the price will vary. So if it's successful, it costs more.
Kind of like drug payback program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or like the tire, the reason why we budgeted generously too is, we discussed with the solid waste management director, Jeff Walls, he hasn't done one since 2011, I think he said. So he believes that the community is ripe to have a recycling take back event. And they don't recycle these in the other events, no one locally does.
Stormwater
It's just
rehab.
the cost of getting that stuff out there. I remember when Travis first came on, he was like literally knocking on doors with flyers, with like, you know, trying to tell farmers, hey, we need to protect source water, you know, we,
Well, with everything.
yeah,
like
I know,
free.
so there was always kind of discussion of cost there to do this one, so. But again, it was always under wastewater, kind of.
Storm sewer rehab, $200,000, what do you have in mind for that?
Right, and, like I said, we're wrapping up the analysis of the airport. So there'll be a project out there, some of it will be on us, and that's what that money will go to. It's a round number, because we don't have a actual number yet, but we have ballpark estimates from Prime and so part of it, there'll be an airport side of things, part of it being our side of things, so.
You typically already budgeted 100,000 out for stormwater out of the sewer fund, and this
Yeah,
additional
you're right.
100 is for the airport.
Right.
And that 100,000 is the ballpark number, not the entire 200,000.
I guess the only general questions I have about it, first of all, the only thing that, well, first of all, it's an enterprise fund, correct? Okay, I mean, you can only spend money that's taken in from the sewer,
Correct.
from the stormwater, on stormwater project.
I mean,
And
The
that has
general
to be
fund-
supplemented from general fund.
exactly.
That money can't be spent anyplace else. Likewise with the sewer fund. A lot of these costs in the stormwater fund have been transferred over from the sanitary fund to the storm fund.
Correct.
Correct.
Has any thought been given to maybe reducing the
No,
sewer
I don't
rates?
mean to laugh, but
to-
we're
Hold
probably
on,
not.
let me finish, Rick.
All right, I'm sorry.
Has any thought been given to reducing the sewer rates as part of an offset for the increase in the rates for the stormwater fund?
Right, and actually we've done that because we're building a wastewater plant. And so we can get away with the 2.5% annual increases because we're moving this expense out of that budget. If we weren't doing the stormwater, we'd probably need 5% annually increases to pay for the new plant. So in effect, there is a credit, but it's not enough to reduce anybody's bill. But certainly people are gonna be paying less for the sewer services because of the stormwater.
So it would be a fair statement, if you're telling your constituents, it'd be a fair statement to say that, yes, although you are paying a stormwater fee now, your sanitary rates would have had to go up partially to pay for the new sewer plant.
Yes.
Had we not done that, put this over to this, moved that money over to this pot.
Right.
That is correct.
And that's a fair statement. Okay.
Right.
Scott Stubbins presented the timing, and I mean, they can go out 30 years, and by the end of that 30 years, it's gray. It's hard to see, it's blurry. But they've been doing, he's working on every 5-year, making the budget forecast of perfectly timing the issuances of bonds with the rate increases, with the reduction of expense by moving that over there. And it really only worked by moving it. It's so thinly traded, correct?
Right, and I continue to use his template that he used when we did the first analysis about when we thought we were gonna have to issue bonds or to do the plant without, we have the loan from the Ohio EPA that's gonna take care of that, thank you very much. We're thrilled with that. But I continue to use his same template to try to, every month or so, I look at the revenues and in the wastewater treatment and the wastewater fund and the expenses and update that all the time, just to make sure we're still on track and that we haven't misguided you somewhere along the way. Because if that's the case, of course, we'll come back and have that discussion. And things are going the direction they need to be and holding the way they need to be with the new rates that are in place and everything that we had talked about at the time. So as of today, we're on track with the wastewater fund, with the sewer fund. And in part because we have moved that stormwater into its own fund with its own revenue stream, which, was a big part of the godsend on that.
Well, and I appreciate everybody keeping an eye on it, because, we all know how the world is today. I mean, pipe prices have doubled in some particular instances.
Oh my God, yeah.
And that isn't gonna change anytime in the near future. So.
Well, we always want to be as proactive as possible. No one wants to throw a 10% increase at something. If we know that a 2% over enough years will get it done,
Well,
right?
the biggest thing, when we discussed this for a long time before actually making the move to separate out stormwater, and I think to your point, helping constituents understand, this is a way to actually help people understand where their money's going. Because before, we were lumping this into another utility. So, if we'd had to raise sewer prices or sewer rates while this was still sitting in that line, I mean, we can't say that's just for the plant. It's for stormwater and all these other things too. And so by splitting this out, to my, if I were talking to a constituent about this, describing that this is how we transparently account for your money. You can be confident that that rate increase is specifically tied to the utility that we are collecting that rate for. The most legal and transparent way to do it. And that's why, not only was it the right thing to do to split them out, but it helps people understand where their money's actually going.
Well, it does, and
I think I agree.
well, if the average person looks at our appropriations here, they're looking at $1.049 million in total appropriations out of the stormwater fund, but they see $300,000 in rehab costs, and they say, what's the difference? Where's the other $700,000? I think we need to be able to explain that, because
It's all stuff moved from wastewater.
Yeah, wastewater's budget was reduced 1.4 in
Yeah.
comparison to last year's.
Right.
And then the storm sewer budget is 1.05, so, it's right there.
And I think it's good, whoever mentioned that we try to stay on top of it so that we don't go behind the 8 ball, because, over the years, we've run into these problems before where we've said, oh my gosh, let's not do this, let's not. And the fact that once a year, the service director comes to you and does his analysis about the rates in all of the enterprise funds and has hopefully always those open discussions with you all, that we stay ahead of that instead of getting to that point where we go, oh no, and we have to throw the big rate increase at somebody. So I'm hoping that this, I think this council and hopefully future councils will keep that up for us to stay ahead of that curve, because we haven't always been able to, or have not always done that, and so
it's
I
codified,
applaud
it's codified law.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
It's a-
someone thought ahead and made it.
It is, so, I applaud everybody and everyone who's working on all of that, council.
Do you have more stormwater? Because Kelsey brought up a point that I think applies well to waste. As far as breaking things out, it might be time to talk about recycling. We lose money on that program every year, and I'm looking at the budget, and is it time to break that out and be more transparent with how we bill that?
Oh, I was wondering where you were going. I was like, the ghost of Paul Hunter is gonna come back.
No.
What are you doing?
No, I
Not getting
think
ready for sex.
I agree with what you said, and it's spot on. And said if you're still asking questions on stormwater, I'm fine with that. But it might be time to have that conversation too.
To help people
To
understand.
help people understand where we're going. So
Again, that's probably something that it should be probably a separate conversation, a committee and sanitation or whatever. But recycling is a service that we provide that we do not make money on.
Yeah.
We do not make money on.
We have
recycling.
4,200 residences, so we make about $40 a year
I
on
thought
it.
it was 5,400.
5,400. It's about 50. We charge a penny each.
I'll say
right?
52.
About $500.
There you go.
You know, what I mean, it's
No, we do not
it's
make money on
ridiculous.
recycling.
So,
We actually have to charge
yes.
now. We have to pay now for our
It's a
waste.
service that we
Before-
provide.
Before there were no tipping fees at Rumpke for our recycling, because it was clean recycling. Our ratio still sits at 50% garbage, non-recyclable, in the recyclables. So they then have to sort our dirty recycling, then we pay the tipping fee for how much of actual garbage Rumpke collected from our recycling, so.
and if we were, I know they do routine quarterly, monthly audits.
You run it through, but sometimes if we got, the last time was a year or two ago, and it was at 50%. And we were sure after an education, because we've done an education program, we got magnets, we redid some toters, we sent mailers out, and it was a zero, it didn't move the needle, at all. It stayed at 50% again, so,
I think people should know that number,
yeah.
that half of what ends up in our recycling is
trash.
not recyclable, yes.
Yeah,
And
just
that
because
is
it's
costly.
plastic, a clamshell does not go in your recycling bin.
And once it's
ever.
contaminated, it all, yeah.
Your plastic bags don't go in, your Amazon packages do not go in.
Who determines the 50%? Is that Rumpke?
Rumpke runs, you take a load of recycling and they run it through and they do their analysis through there.
So
Learn to make money,
I
guys.
was gonna say, there's not a third party?
No.
It's a little, there's an incentive.
Well, they built the plant, right? They're the ones that put up the money for the sorting facility, so
Well, we could have a whole meeting just on recycling.
maybe we should. Maybe
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah,
conversation for future.
absolutely could.
It's,
I'd love to.
Kelsey just kind of brought up the point about with the stormwater and flagged it in my head, so. As far as waste fund goes, one question I did have, where are toters hiding? Do we need to, is there any?
I almost said in wastewater.
They have a waste. I might have said wastewater, if I did, I apologize.
Like what line are they in?
Container purchases?
Was it containers?
Yeah.
Well, the
Container
line item has
purchases.
zero.
But
That's
we
what I'm
did
like,
I believe we did a big purchase a while ago, and we still have stacks.
Yeah.
So we don't anticipate needing,
Not,
okay.
I don't believe this year, no.
That's what I was going towards, so.
Well, we also still had a lot that, they come with a 10-year warranty. So I don't know how easy it is to warranty the work, but they do have that warranty, they're pretty sturdy. We don't,
We can have it.
yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to highlight, as we've been talking about wastewater and stormwater and a lot of these kind of sea changes we've had in reorganizing how we think about the utilities and how we fund them, as I'm approaching the end of 6 years and feeling a bit nostalgic and thinking back, you know, where we were 6 years ago with different leadership. And I remember I remember those early water committee meetings, and the general tone was just haggard. You know, I remember every time I would speak to previous leadership, and he would never ask for more money because he knew it wasn't there. We hadn't raised rates in so long. The general fund, as we knew, was about to go off a cliff. The picture was dire, and every time we would say, oh, great, like you've kept it to X line, it was, but like I've got a guy bringing his own tools into work. Just literally bringing his own toolbox because we haven't bought tools. And it became increasingly anxiety producing for everyone with any proximity to the city to realize just how staggering the amount of deferred maintenance was. And I remember a particularly emotional day when the mayor brought in his axe, it says Flint, Michigan on it, and we had just read a pretty revealing book about the source of the water crisis in Flint, and that truly that water crisis goes back to we've got to cut the budget. We can't afford to get water from a reputable source, and we're going to get water from a source with a much higher salinity, and we're going to skip the safety measures because we can't afford them. And we all know what happened. And I remember you put the axe on the wall and said, we won't be Flint. You know, we won't do that. And so I just want to also recognize that this budget to me also represents this change in culture where we no longer sit and say, there's actually hundreds of thousands of dollars in deferred maintenance that we're not even going to talk about or touch because we don't have the money. And instead we do the really scary thing, which is to come into a meeting and say, I need millions of dollars because that's what it takes to deliver safe drinking water. And so I just wanted to say thank you to the administration for that change in culture that I witnessed in 6 years. And I know it really, really sucks. I don't have a more political or nice way to put it, to ask for money all the time.
Oh, yeah.
It's not fun to walk into meetings and say there's more deferred maintenance than I realize, there's more deferred maintenance than I realize all the time. But I'm appreciative that this is a culture of honesty where we don't hide problems. So,
And fixing those things is the most responsible thing we can do for the community.
yeah. I just am grateful to sleep at night knowing that we're not sweeping things under the rug. And I want to be clear that previous leadership was in an impossible situation. Absolutely impossible, and I think that he probably did not sleep. Based on conversations with him, where he seemed close to breaking down, I can only imagine. So I just wanted to thank you all for putting the budget together and for bringing a lot of those issues to light. That's all.
The axe handle was actually for you to beat me with, Kelsey, if I did anything wrong. You had to use it
I know
again.
where it is. Well, we still have 3 weeks left, so.
We got out of the woods.
I'll wipe the DNA off, you're fine.
Yeah. No, and I did appreciate Marion had sent some follow-ups with just clarification. So having not been here at the last meeting, I appreciated some of the clarifications on administrative salary lines and some of the other things you all brought up. So thank you for your questions in the budget workshop, so I could play catch up on that as well.
Yeah, I've been kind of peppering everybody with little ones too from having this. One question I did have about fire. We have fire salaries. Is that anticipating our best guess at
It's full
negotiation?
staff. I believe it's not, no, actually, let me rephrase. I interrupted before you finished your question, so I apologize. That does not include, it has a very generic cost of living increase, not what we think. It does not include like a wage adjustment that is, you know,
Probably
all,
coming.
could happen. Let's just say, I won't say probably, I'll just say is a option for negotiation, I'll say, a possibility. What it does actually reflect is full staff. So the safer grants and
It's been a
instead
long
of,
time since
It has been
we've said that.
very, very slow. And it's one of the critical staffing nationwide is paramedic.
For sure. Okay, thank you.
Any other budget-related questions? Okay, with that, I will respectfully ask for the second reading of ordinance 2157 by title only.
I mean, I do have one more.
Okay.
I was gonna bring it to Scram, because it happens every meeting, but.
The what?
The Scram line. We, for 6 years, talked about what Scram is and.
Alcohol
what-
monitoring.
Yes. Comes up every budget, and I wasn't here for the last one, so, no, I have no relationship.
So just tradition.
Just traditional to discuss Scram, because we have to. It is, I know.
Something alcohol monitoring.
Yeah.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion, second, for the second reading of ordinance 2157. May we have roll call for this, please?
Snar,
Yes.
Bickert,
Yes.
Turkey,
Yes.
Evelyn,
Yes?
Lehrman,
Yes.
Swindler.
Yes.
Motion passes. May we have second reading, please?
Making appropriations for current expenses and other expenses and other expenditures and creating necessary funds for said appropriations of the city of Wilmington, Ohio during the fiscal year ending December 31, 2022.
Okay, I will ask for the third reading on our December 16th regular council meeting. Next item for this evening, we have, this is a carryover from the last meeting. This is the second and third reading on ordinance 2158, making supplemental appropriations. Most of these that you'll see on here are remaining disbursements for the hotel lodging tax. There is one in here for $15,000, which was our portion that were invoiced from the county for the acting judges' salaries. There was a $20 municipal court travel and transportation charge. And then the very last one, taxi fund, you'll see $15,000 there. That's due to a negative balance in that line, just due to too many transfers and previous requests. So these are all, we did the first reading and it was supposed to be 3 readings in the last meeting. We didn't have move to suspend the rules and regulations and give second and third reading on ordinance 2158 by title only.
Second.
Motion by Pickett, second by Swindler, for the suspension of rules ordinance 2158. May we have roll call, please?
Bicker,
Yes.
Perky,
Yes.
Evelyn,
Yes?
Learman,
Yes.
Schindler,
Yes.
Snar.
Yes.
Carries. May we have second and third reading, please?
Making supplemental appropriations.
Move for passage?
Second.
Motion second for passage. Roll call, please.
Perky,
Yes.
Evelyn,
Yes?
Learman,
Yes.
Schindler,
Yes.
Snar,
Yes.
Bicker.
Yes.
Ordinance 2158 passes.
Thank you. Next, we have three readings on ordinance 2154, establishing a new fund. This is regarding the Ronback Avenue project. This is the ODOT OPWC fund. We've talked about this in other meetings as well. Any questions here? Okay, I will move to give first reading on ordinance 2154 by title only.
Second.
Motion by Pickett, second by Snar. First reading ordinance 2154. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Move to first reading, please.
Establishing a new fund.
I move to suspend the rules and regulations and give second and third reading of ordinance 2154 by title only.
Second.
Motion second for suspension of rules. May we have roll call, please?
Evelyn,
Yes.
Learman,
Yes.
Schindler,
Yes.
Snar,
Yes.
Bicker,
Yes.
Perky.
Yes.
Motion carries. May we have second and third reading, please?
Establishing a new fund.
Move for passage?
Second.
Motion second for passage. Roll call, please.
Learman,
Yes.
Schindler,
Yes.
Snar,
Yes.
Bicker.
Yes.
Perky,
Yes.
Evelyn.
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance 2154 passes.
Thank you. Moving on to three readings on ordinance 2155, making supplemental appropriations. I'll let our auditors talk through these, but most of these are related to the Ronback Avenue fund. The last item I can touch on, item E for $20,736. This is covering the final transfer to cover the payments for the jump hanger TIF. And I'll let you speak to the others in regards to the Ronback Avenue.
Just like we did with the budget, because the state of Ohio, the ODOT project for Ronback Avenue, they gave us, we had all the different grants, and we had the paving, and we had safety, and we had the loan, and all of those, and we put them in separate funds. But when they make a payment to Jurgensen, or whoever's doing, they don't then, we can't take that invoice and they said, this much came from this one and this much came from this. So, because we still have to do that booking to those. So, just like we did in the budget process, we have adjusted our amended certificate with the county because there have been payments made in this calendar year that we're going to have to do those entries. So, all I did, and I just used the whole amount, we certainly are not going to do the whole $9 million, but it was easier to comprehend when I said, here are all of these that we're getting rid of. Those are the negative supplementals that you see there, because those funds are going away. And we have combined them into the one fund that we just created. And it's, when you add those numbers up, the number in the fund that we created
This is 3.8.
is the three,
Right.
is the 3.8 plus. Would be those that are put together. And so we'll be doing those. We will have entries that need to be made, and so I'm lining us up with how we've had to adjust with our certificate with the county, our certificate of resources, our revenues with the county, because those revenues are not going to be able to be recognized in those separate funds and only in the one project fund. And yes, the TIF, as we all know, we get real estate dollars on the TIF. It goes to paying the loan to the state of Ohio. It goes to our required revised code obligations to make the schools whole. And what that revenue does not cover, the rest of it must come out of the general fund. And so this is wrapping up our year for that TIF, those TIF payments. The transfer into there for the TIF payments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I'll move to give first reading on ordinance 2155 by title only.
Second.
Motion by Pickett, second by Swindler, first reading ordinance 2155. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? First reading, please.
Making supplemental appropriations.
Move to suspend the rules and regulations and give second and third reading of ordinance 2155 by title only.
Second.
Motion second for suspension of rules. Can we have roll call, please?
Snar?
Yes.
No? I keep doing that to you. Just
He's
kidding.
fun to mess with.
Swindler?
Yes.
Snar?
Yes.
Bickert?
Yes.
Perky?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Learman?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, motion passes. May we have second and third reading, please?
Making supplemental appropriations.
Move for passage.
Second.
Motion second for passage. Roll call, please.
Snar?
Yes.
Bickert?
Yes.
Perky?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Learman?
Yes.
Swindler?
Yes.
Ordinance 2155 passes.
Thank you. Our last piece of legislation, we have ordinance 2156, making miscellaneous transfers. This is $2,000 and covers remaining expenses. This is in relation to the highway department. So this will cover them for hopefully the rest of the year. Questions? Okay. I move to give first reading on ordinance 2156 by title only.
Second.
Motion by Pickett, second by Swindler, first reading ordinance 2156. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? May we have first reading, please?
Be it ordained by the council of the city of Wilmington, state, oh, I'm sorry. Let's do this one, shall we? Making miscellaneous transfers.
I move to suspend the rules and regulations and give second and third reading of ordinance 2156 by title only.
Second.
Motion second for suspension of the rules. Roll call, please.
Bickert?
Yes.
Perky?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Learman?
Yes.
Swindler?
Yes.
Snar?
Yes.
Motion passes. May we have second and third reading, please?
Making miscellaneous transfers.
Move for passage.
Second.
Motion second for passage. Roll call, please.
Perky?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Learman?
Yes.
Swindler? Snar?
Yes.
Bickert?
Yes.
Ordinance 2156 passes.
We have nothing further this evening, Mr. President.
Thank you.
One more finance committee meeting to go.
Seem awful happy.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, we're gonna miss you, but we'll save that for next week.
Yeah.
Judiciary Committee, Mr. Burke.
I have, for the first time in months, have no official report.
I don't want to ruin it. No official report, but I did want to ask, because you had sent an email to all of council, and obviously
Yes.
I was not at the meeting either, I know we were both gone.
I didn't know you were
Just-
gonna be there, so, or wanted to
Yeah,
be there,
no, so it's just curious for an update.
but. I think, are we,
What are we talking about?
So he had sent an email saying
I
that
sent
the
an
Port
email
Authority
about-
had further ideas to present to us, and I was not at the
I
meeting.
think Dan will be discussing that at some point tonight,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, we'll see.
We can get around to it.
No,
So
your
you have-
That's all.
executive session is
Thank
about
you.
the court deal.
Public Works Committee, Ms. Flake.
Two items tonight. The first is the second reading on our water rate legislation. And I just wanted to circle back to this one because obviously I was not here for the first reading. And I know Councilperson Evelyn had brought up some questions at the previous meeting before we brought this in front of full council. And I'm not certain from reading the minutes if all those questions were answered. So if we need to go back through any of the like commercial water rates or for any of your additional questions, we certainly can do that.
No, I did have questions on it. I've turned them into service director.
Okay.
Did some answers back to me.
Okay, great.
And basically simple things, very similar to what we talked about, stormwater. But
Some of them I have easy that I can know off. A lot of this is will take a little work. You know, yes, about debt coverage and
Oh, sorry, you also
I have
Right.
updated that.
Right.
Would you like me to speak to that?
Please.
And we discussed this a little bit right before council also. Our debt service coverage, just as a reminder, is a calculation that we do that is a covenant with our bond issue that we still have outstanding with the water fund. And we are required by law to carry a 1.1, which means we must have that much more in revenue than expenses. Operating revenue and expenses, not capital, not necessarily even engineering. There are a lot of things that we take out of that calculation, one-time expenses, one-time revenues also on both sides. So over the last 5 years, one thing that Councilman Evelyn was asking about, in 2017, our debt service coverage was 1.3. In 2018, it was 1.32. In 2019, it was 1.67. We had a good year, obviously. But then in 2020, it dropped to 1.3. Now that's, your operating expenses continue to become more over the years, and if your rates aren't following with that. So I did an analysis with a year-to-date as of the end of November. So as if the end of November were the end of the year for us. And our debt service coverage would be 1.15. Now, I had to make a lot of estimates. Yes, we're going to spend all of this salary, or yes, we're going to spend, do some calculations there. But at first blush, that is where that is. And what's important about that with our rates, and I said it before, and I don't want to be the broken record, but if we don't meet this coverage and we have to turn that into bank, U.S. Bank is the bank that holds our bonds issue. If we don't meet that coverage, they will come in and they will tell us what our rates are. They won't say, oh, let's talk about it. What would you like to do? They'll say, this is what it's going to be. I mean, now we've never had to do this. Thank you, whoever, that we've never had to go down that path. One time I did have National Bank, when we were right on the edge with one of our other bond issues, come knocking on my door saying, we had to do some work on that and make that not happen with one of our other bond issues. So I don't want to ever go down that path, and I don't want ever to be put in that position. So as we discuss rates, we want to remember that this is a really important piece of that, and I'm always willing to update those numbers. We discussed trying to do projection. Let's project 2022 or 2023, and we can do that. I have done it, realizing that once again, just like sometimes our budget or our revenue estimates, it's our best estimate. I don't ever want to use guess. Our best estimate of what those things are going to be. And bond counsel, once upon a time, we used to, when we gave this financial information to the banks, we used to project the next year, and they advised us not to, because it was our best estimate, and it could paint the wrong picture, because you're putting your best foot forward, and you're saying, oh yeah, this is what we're going to do, and as soon as you put it in writing, somebody's going to want to try to hold your feet to that fire. And not that we're not trying to hide anything by any stretch. So I'm always willing to do those analyses for your committee meetings or for this body at any time and say, this is my best estimate. But I just want to reassure you that we're running right on the edge. And I'm hoping that this, at the end of the year, that this 1.15 is not 1.15, it's 1.25, something better than that. And it very well could be. We've got another month to go of things that may or may not be spent. So, thank you.
Mary Kay, one step ahead of me, yes, she usually is.
No.
In asking that question, but I would like to know, the difference between 1.1 and 1.2, how many real dollars is that?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know that answer. I'll be perfectly honest, I couldn't tell you what that answer
I got
is.
a feeling
I-
you'll ballpark stuff. It just-
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, and I don't know which dollars you mean, because it's a comparison of revenues to expenditures. So maybe your revenues are better in this year and your expenditures were maybe not as much, and so I can't put that dollar because I can't say, well, the revenue went up this year. I can look at the revenue, and the year that we had 1.67, the revenue, total revenues were up $2 million over the year prior. But the operating expenses were up by $500,000 too. So, I mean, it's a dance. It's a dance between those two numbers, and to try to pin down exactly which one and say, quantify it exactly. Sure, I'll give you a number, but I'm not really sure that it gives you the answer
I'm
you're
just
looking
looking
for.
for magnitude of scale. And
Yeah.
my reason for that, and again, this is just hypothetical, but if we really got in trouble, couldn't general fund supplement that? Or does it really have to be just rates?
You know, I don't want to find out. Yes, yes, the general fund can always supplement any enterprise funds. Absolutely, it absolutely could. I don't know that the city, in my tenure, has ever done that.
And we don't want to.
And
I
we don't
understand
want
that.
to.
I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of it.
Right.
Way out
Oh,
of the box
sure.
if we got it.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I understand the question. But it is an enterprise fund, and we want it to continue to be that, and it's a business. Just like anybody other's business, I mean, you have to separate that from the fire department, the police department, and all the others. It's a little bit different because that's why it's called an enterprise fund, because it is a business, and so we have to treat it that way, just like the business at the air park that's doing whatever. And if their costs go up and they need to do something, and once they do their analysis, they may up their prices. We have to kind of sometimes step back and say, we know that our citizens are paying for it, but so are people who are buying products, and we have to try to embrace that we are a business also for every one of those when we do that, and try to take some of that emotion out of that. So.
Yeah, the only other question I really, a lot of the questions that I have boil down to a couple of things. Number one, we've talked about the impact of the rate increase on residential customers. But I'm curious as to what percentage of our water revenues derive from institutional, commercial, industrial.
Right, so we have 3 categories. So institutional, we put a commercial in our stats. So commercial is 24% of revenues.
How much?
24. Industrial is 34% of revenue. Residential is 42% of revenue. And what bothers me a little bit about that, we give a break to users that use a lot of water. But, if they're over 185,000 gallons a month, they get almost 20% price break. So, residential users only use 36% of the water, but they're paying 42% of the income from usage fees. Whereas industrial customers are using 40% of the water, but only contributing 34% of the revenue. So they are, obviously,
That's happens.
yeah, and obviously industrial is important, and there is some economy of scale with usable water, but we do have business-friendly rates already. A lot of towns had no breaks at all for usable water. And Cincinnati,
Except for
its
increasing
suburbs, some other places, actually charge you more if you use more water. We have very friendly business rates.
And isn't our first break at 50,000 gallons?
Right, that's what we're
Our
doing,
first tier.
doing now,
Because I know you
and
compared.
and most places, I did a unscientific survey where that break comes at different cities. Some places it's as high as 3 million gallons before you get a break. And of all the ones that I looked at, there were the ones that give breaks for high usage. The average comes at 200,000 gallons. We're doing 50, and the median of all those was almost 500,000. So, you know, certainly I'm nobody's more enthusiastic about being business friendly. If we sell more water, we won't have to raise rates as much. But it costs what it costs to make and distribute the water and maintain everything. And boy, you know, life would be easier if I didn't have to do all these things. If we didn't have to fix all these things. But if you're gonna have safe, plentiful water, that's what we're, you know, this is what we need. You add to the 5 largest customers are, and this is pretty predictable, to protect Alchemies, University, the college, and the hospital are the top 5.
Where did the schools fill in that?
I'm sorry?
Where does Wilmington City Schools fit in?
They are, let's see here. Yeah, they dumped in out of like 9, 10, 11, 12, and for this particular month, they are not in the top 10. But they were, I mean, but even, I don't have them in front of me, but yeah, some months they'll creep into the top 10, that month they did. Yes, for a spreadsheet on all the different projects and all the different things, and I can produce that. I have what I have to do that same thing for EPA. So I had something like that EPA has approved. So I can share what I got. I really don't have it spelled out year by year by year by year. I do have target years, and really there's so much. Part of this ends up being what catches fire right now, you know, triage. I mean, there's not much that it used to be, but the this last month, the carbon dioxide tank started leaking. So that emergency type situation to get that fixed, Adam actually, he did all the work to make it happen, and I cheered him on, he did a great job. I was actually on vacation when most of that repair happened, but it's just, so what I'm trying to say is that I have priorities and whatnot, but boy, they get shuffled every couple months.
That's fine. I guess my request would be just, can you share those with us in the future?
Right, and you know, basically, you know, the report listed those things, and the last page had some of it broke out by years. Some of the bigger ones of the report from April were broken out, going out 30, 40 years. So, and that's what I turned into the EPA so,
And the good thing, when he's referring to that April report, just to take 2 steps back, that's that rate review report. So I actually pulled it back up the other day after our last meeting and read through that project list. So the good thing is, not only will this conversation happen at budget time, but you'll have it again in a couple months, where that project list comes right back up because it comes as part of the annual rate review. So it's that same project list, just continually getting updated. So even outside of budget, there will at least be those guaranteed benchmarks to get updates.
Yeah, what I was hoping for was something to show us how much we can afford to spend on these projects with the rate increases proposed now. In other
Right.
words, are we asking for enough? That's
well, you know, and that, I haggle over that all the time, and right now, almost every estimate that I have there is probably section, or price estimate. So, who knows? But certainly, you know, I worry about affordability, you know, all the time. And so, you know, even though I'm a champion of doing everything we have to do to make sure that safe water, I am just as concerned of what it really costs the average person and what it costs the everybody. So, and that's water affordability is a discussion across the whole country. And part of the infrastructure bill is to throw money at ideas on how to address that. You know, some big cities will give discounts to low income, discounts to seniors, but that district everybody else pays more. But it's, in the big city, there's a lot more people to spread that over, so it's not so painful. But if we gave low income people, seniors, whoever, 20% discount, well, then everybody else does, they 20% more than the cost. So it's you know, I think about this, I run numbers, I do this all the time, I mean, continuously, and figure, you know, the guys come and tell me something else broke, you know, how you like pull this off, and luckily, you know, they're good at getting creative and you know, getting it done right, but figuring out a way to do it as economically as possible. So then, you know, this question was comparing our rates with Lebanon, Mason, Hillsborough, and the courthouse. And I can do that, but the apples and oranges here is, and that's part of it, plus nobody else is paying $1 million a year in fees and expenses to get the water to town. So our rates are gonna be higher compared to other towns because we got more expensive because we decided it's a great resource, but it costs us lots of money. And it's really, you know, it's
I understand that, Rick, and I appreciate that. All I'm doing is asking for the comparison, not a reasoning behind it or anything else. If you just get me that, I think we can go ahead and move on.
oh yeah, sure. I mean, I'll do the research, but that'll be easy.
Thank you.
And I do think he brought up the water affordability, and I know that you had brought that up, Rick, when we had the discussion around when we made temporary measures during the pandemic to help with people who had water shut-offs. So I'm also saying that'd be another conversation to potentially continue because we scratched the surface when we did reconnections, but obviously there's a lot more to that conversation. And I remember when I brought the reconnections to Rick, he was like, do you actually want to discuss water affordability? This is not it. You know, this is a temporary solution to get people connected to water, but the conversation around affordability is much larger. And we've not been able to tackle it, but certainly worth discussing further. Are there any other questions that we need to resolve prior to the second reading for the rate legislation? I would echo what Christy said about the budget, and the beauty of spreading this out is we do have another opportunity to discuss this at the end of December. And it sounds like he's got some more to prepare and bring forward, but is there anything else we should discuss tonight? If not, I will move for the second reading by title only.
Second?
Yes.
Swindler?
Yes.
Snar?
Yes.
Bicker?
Yes.
Perky?
Yes.
Seeing all in favor, may we have the second reading, please?
An ordinance amending chapter 929 of the codified ordinances of the city of Wilmington in order to provide for an increase in water rates, repealing any and all legislation inconsistent herewith.
And then our second item, much more pleasant, accepting some money. So we were delighted to get additional grant funding. Any questions about this one? I know we talked about this 2 meetings ago even, so. Okay. If not, I'll move for the first reading on resolution 2146 by title only.
Second?
First reading, or excuse me, motion by Swindler, second by Perky, I believe.
Yeah, that's Christie. Figured.
Okay, we give it to Kristen. For the first reading, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? May we have the first reading, please?
Authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a grant agreement with Ohio Department of Development in support of the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project and declaring an emergency.
Move for the suspension of rules and regulations to give resolution 2146 second and third reading by title only.
Second?
Motion second for suspension of rules. May we have roll call, please?
Learman?
Yes.
Swindler?
Yes.
Snar?
Yes.
Bicker?
Yes.
Perky?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
All in favor, may we have second and third reading, please?
Authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a grant agreement with Ohio Department of Development in support of the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project and declaring an emergency.
Move for passage.
Second?
Motion second, passing, roll call, please.
Swindler?
Yes.
Snar?
Yes.
Bicker?
Yes.
Perky?
Yes.
Evelyn?
Yes.
Learman?
Yes.
Resolution 2146 passes.
That's all I have.
Thank you. We don't have anyone here for solid waste. Is there any report?
No report.
You have before you the income tax report. What is your pleasure?
Move it be accepted as presented?
Motion by Vicker.
Second.
Second by Perky to accept the income tax report as presented. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Income tax is accepted as presented. Now, opening the meeting to the public. Anyone that would like to talk with council, please come forward. Keep your comments as brief as possible. Seeing none, I would remind you all that we will be unfortunately having to name a couple of new chair people to committees. There's very instrumental people that have had committees in the past, mainly Kelsey and Christie. And if anyone would like to step forward, I have had a couple of comments from folks that might be interested in that. Or if you wish to make a change, or if you wish to be on a certain committee, let me know as soon as you can.
Yeah, I'll just add that I'd be happy to meet with whoever is the new finance committee chair and make that transition if we need to.
I know you will.
That's very generous. I'll make the same offer.
It's a lot. There's, I mean, every meeting, you're pretty busy,
It is
so
a
if I
lot.
can make that smoother for whoever's gonna take that spot, happy to help.
Yeah.
It could be intimidating at first, I know.
Yeah.
Any other comments from council? If not, we have an executive session on our agenda, and I would like to have a motion to enter into
Oh,
executive session.
Can I
Yes.
clarify something before we go into executive session? Will we have any legislation? I don't see any on the agenda. Following.
I have no legislation to present.
After the executive session.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, we need a motion.
Can't go without a motion.
Matt's the only one that remembers the wording of the motion,
I'm
so I
ready.
just
Sure.
wanna-
I'm happy to. David, are we able to combine G8 and G3 in one, or do I need to read them separately? under executive session?
I would probably leave it so.
Okay. Should we adjourn from the first before we enter into the second?
That would make it clean.
I thought so, but I just wanted to clarify. So pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, chapter 121.22, section G, item 8, I move to enter executive session to discuss confidential information related to marketing plans, specific business strategy, production techniques, trade secrets, or personal financial statements of an applicant for economic development assistance, or to negotiation with other political subdivisions requesting or respecting requests for economic development assistance.
Second.
Motion by Purdy, second by Learman to enter executive session. May we have roll call, please?
Snar,
Not here yet. Sorry, yeah.
Maria. Bickert,
Yes.
Perky,
Yes.
Evelyn,
Yes?
Learman,
Yes.
Schindler.
Yes.